Today I'm going to go over how to set up DeployStudio Server with the latest version of OS 10 Yosemite 10.10.4. I've had a lot of people ask me how to set it up, so I've set up a number of them over the last number of months. So I just want to give a quick video on basically how to set it up from scratch. So I'm going to try to be quick, but also be informative enough so that you guys can follow along. So first things first, you want to make sure you have the latest version of the OS. So again, I'm running 10.10.4. The next thing you want to do is you want to download both the DeployStudio Server application as well as the server app for OS 10. So DeployStudio will be deploystudio.com. You'll go to Downloads. You'll go to the latest version, and you can go ahead and download that. I already have it downloaded, so I'm not going to download that right now. The next step is to go ahead and download OS 10 Server. I'm going to have 4.1.3 here, and again I already have this downloaded, but I haven't run it, so we'll be running that from scratch. Okay, so from here we want to make sure we have a name for our server. I've called it DeployStudio Server. I've also gone ahead and set up a static. Maybe not. Yeah. So I'm just going to go with 10.1.1.2. Apply that. And I've also set this up in a domain environment just because most people are going to be watching this video will be on a domain. So let's go ahead and continue from here. So the first step is we need to actually run the server application. So here it is here. Just keep that in the dock. You can go through and continue through this. Yeah, make sure you read all that. Once the server application has been installed, the first thing I suggest is go ahead and let's run hostname edit. This just tidies things up in case the IP address is changed or the actual name of the computer, and just gets everything in sync before we get everything going on the server. So let's go ahead and next. Again, I'm running on a domain, so I'm just going to put it on the internet. So yes, it's called DeployStudio Server, and I'm just going to put in what the actual domain is. And it's picked up the correct address, so let's go ahead and finish this up. And I don't want DNS. So again, what this does is it just cleans things up. So if you had already installed the application and you change the IP address or the name of the computer, or if you do this at any point, you can run this edit and for the host name, and this will put everything back in sync. So this takes about a half minute to a minute. Okay, so we're all good to go here. So the next step is I want to add a user. So I'm just going to call this DS for DeployStudio and just a basic password. This account is used for connecting to the server for the shares, as well as making the connection for DeployStudio Netboot itself. So let's create that. And once this finishes up, the next step is I want to create an actual SharePoint. So if you have any in here that you don't need, I would just get rid of them all. And then you can create your SharePoint for DeployStudio. Now, what I normally do is I create a shares at the root of the hard drive, and then I have my SharePoints aside of this. Reason I do this is so that, let's go ahead and create this. If I have any other shares down the road, I'll pull them inside of this instead of populating the root of the hard drive. So it just keeps things clean. Right now we have no files in here, so I'm just going to leave this open in the background here. So now we need to add the DeployStudio user. So DS, and has read-write access, and you keep everything up here by default. Okay, now we can go ahead and enable that service. The next step, if you come down to advanced, you're going to do show, and in here we want net install. Now net install is basically going to host the Netboot file for Deploy Studio, so the clients are going to be able to boot from the network with the operating system. Well, basically it's called Netboot. So let's open up another hard drive here. By default, it's going to go to your root of your hard drive under library under Netboot. Now it is not here, so what we need to do is come in here. We need to choose edit storage settings, and we're going to choose, we want the images and client data saved to this hard drive. If you have alternate hard drives or RAIDs, you can go ahead and save it there as well. So let's go ahead and create it, and as you can see here, it shows where the default location would be. Hit OK, and we come in here. We now have the Netboot folder. So in this folder is where Netboot SP0, and here's where your Netboot files are going to be. We'll go ahead and create that in a few minutes, but I just wanted to show you basically that's how you set up the folders. We can't enable the service yet. If we do, it's just going to not go because there's no folders or no bootable OSs available. So from here, we just leave it for a second. The next step is to go ahead and install Deploy Studio itself. So let's grab the install. Run the install. Of course, Apple, thank you. I love how this gets enabled after an update. Okay, let's try that again. So the install is very straightforward. Just continue through. Okay, so that has been completed. So now we want to actually open up settings, DeployStudio Server, and basically this is where you're going to come in and launch your assistant. This is where you can enable the service itself, turn it off, turn it on, and check your settings and your status. So we want to go ahead and launch assistant. You can go ahead and start the service. In here we have a few options. We have actually put in the settings for the server itself, settings for the PC, DeployStudio PC server. I have used it. It does work. It can be a little bit tricky with DNS, but that's something I'm not going to cover today. And create Netboot set. So this is what's going to create the actual bootable OS that all the clients are going to boot from. So first things first, we want to set up the server itself. So let's continue. And it's already grabbed the address. Sometimes it will put in the DNS address. I suggest using the IP address, just a bit more solid. So DS, this is the user we created. This is a master server, and I'm going to set this to a network SharePoint. You can do local. It's not. It's a little different. It's just local files on the server. I prefer having it on a SharePoint so that if I can log in, grab files or images as needed. So I'm going to put in the share itself. So 10.1.1.2. So this is the share we've created here. So as you can see, there's nothing in here. When we go past here, it's going to basically place all the folders that DeployStudio is going to need. And I've made a mistake here. I believe that's my address. .1.1.2. 10.1.1.2. got something going on here. It helps if I actually spell DeployStudio correctly. Okay. So let's put in the correct one. And again, add the DeployStudio user. Everything's default. And the service is running. So let's try this again. So DeployStudio, continue. There we go. So now if we come back to this folder, it's gone ahead and already populated the files that DeployStudio is going to use. And let's go back to here. So continue. You just go blow right through this. And we are now done setting up the server. So the next step is to actually create a DeployStudio Netboot image. So let's go ahead and continue this. And you can call it whatever you want. So I'm just going to call it my test. You can give it any identifier you want. Continue. Here is where you have a preferred and alternate address. I would go ahead and use your DNS as the secondary, not the primary. For this test, I'm just going to go ahead and just use it as both. This is the user, so this is the DeployStudio user. This is the one that, if you have this in here, when the computers boot up to the image, it's not going to require the username and password. If you leave this information out, and a client computer boots up to DeployStudio, it will require the username and password. So it's up to you if you want the end user to mistakenly jump in, or I've had the odd user do that. But I try to keep it unlocked so that I can just boot up an entire lab and do not have to put in username and password. So let's go ahead and continue. I checked off display runtime, shows a log in the background of what's going on. If you have any errors, it will show you. So let's go ahead and continue. Continue, and this is going to place the Netboot in the Netboot SP0 folder that we created through the net install application. So, and we're also going to make it default. So let's go ahead and continue. And there it goes. So it's now being created right now. So I'm just going to close this window. This can take anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes depending on your computer. It's basically building an entire operating system for the clients to boot from. While this is being created, I'm going to go back to the DeployStudio share. I just happen to have some files that I use when I image. So for example, I have some packages. I'm going to put this in the packages folder. I have some enrollment and trust profiles. I'm going to put those in the configurations profiles. And I have a couple scripts. Trying to think here. I can't remember which ones I use as a script, which ones as a file. But anyway, so that's how that works. So once DeployStudio is open and we create custom workflows, this stuff here will show up in there. I will show that later once we get into the actual program itself. So for now, I'm just going to go ahead and speed this up. Okay, so once the Netboot file's been created, that's basically the last step with the server itself. So you can go from here and you just go ahead and close this. So right now we have our server working. We have our repository, so this is the actual share itself. That's up and running, and our status is ready to go. So we go to close this as well. And now that the Netboot file has been created, we can come back to net install. and go ahead and enable the service. It has already showed up in here, so go ahead and enable that. And basically that is it for configuring the server itself. So we can go ahead and just close this program now. And okay, let's hold off for a sec. There we go. Okay, so from here, we want to go ahead and open up DeployStudio Admin. So this can be found in the Utilities folder. So we want this program here. So let's just put that in dock. Let's run this. Now this is what the server. This is what you use for the server itself for creating all the workflows. So let's go ahead and put our DS user in here. And so once we're logged in here, so activities. So every client that's going to be connecting to the server, they're all going to show up in here. Once you've set up a computer, if you've done the naming or any information that is collected, it's all going to come in here. And then we have our actual workflows. We'll come back to this in a second. All the images that you either image up for Windows or the Mac OS or whatever OSs you have are all going to show up in here. We have our packages. As you remember earlier, I added 2 of them. And you have extra scripts as well. So I'm just going to go ahead, and I actually placed one on the server here. It's just a base OS. I'm going to come into my shares here, and I'm going to go in there, and under masters, HFS, this is our Mac images. So I'm going to go place this in here. Okay, close that, and let's see if it refreshes in here. There you go. So it's going to populate in here all the images that you have available for your workflows. So let's go back to workflows. This here is basically the steps that the computer is going to take during imaging. You can have it as complex as you want it or as simple as you want. Very simple, such as this one here is just create a disk image. So this is what's actually going to image your computer. So once you've gone through, customize your image, this will image it up to the server. You install packages. This is not something I usually use because I'll usually have it in a workflow. I'm just going to remove that. Restore disk image, restore a master volume. This here is, say if you're going to do one-off machines, it's not bad having this one in place. So once the machine boots up, let's go to your runtime here. You're basically going to be given this option. You can go ahead and play. And then on this part, you're going to get listed all the images you have available. You can select your partition you want, your image, and then go ahead and hit play and continue. Now, as to how complex you can go, let's go ahead and create a quick one. So let's call this test. Now, if you hit this little plus icon, you're going to get all your options on the right here. So, for example, I want to restore a partition. So first thing I want to do is choose the restore. It will automatically partition the drive into one. If you want to select partition, you can create multiple partitions, but because we're only going to go with one image, I'm just going to choose the restore option. And here, for example, this is a lab. I want everything automated, so I'm going to choose, basically it's going to grab the first disk available, and I want my image that I have on here. You can rename the partition if you want. I uncheck restore system recovery because in our labs I don't install the restore partition. I do install it on staff laptops. So this is up to you if you want to include that. And I want it automated. So basically it's going to go through the step on its own. Once it's done that, what I do is I name my computer. So I'm going to choose configure as well as host name. Just remember which one I put in here first. I believe it's this one here. So what's going to happen is the computer, after it's gone through and restored the image, it's going to pop up and ask for the name of the computer. Once I place that in, The next step is actually going to go ahead and apply these settings. So it's actually going to apply that name to the computer. If I have any images that I want installed, for example, I use Monkey Tools, and I want that to be automated, and it's going to happen on post of installation. So the computer's actually going to restart and go through all the post settings and install everything else. Say I have a second package, I forgot to install Rico drivers on this image, or it's just an older image, I want to update them, I can do that as well here. So there's a cool feature. If you want to update some stuff during the installation, you can go ahead and do that. So again, I'm going to automate that. If you are on Active Directory, you can bring down the Active Directory binding tool, and you can put in your domain. You can put it right in the OU that it's going to go into an Active Directory. Username, password. You can set administrator. UNC path. This is basically going to be the Active Directory mounted drive. So you can fill around in here and put in your settings, and this will automatically bind the computer to Active Directory for you without you having to touch the computer. Same thing goes for Open Directory. Same thing, you can put in your server address, and then if you're running authentication, you can put that in here as well. I used to run this for years, Active Directory and Open Directory bonding straight from the server. It's very slick. Now I use automatic enrollment because I have a profile server in place that I use basically for pushing up printers and Active Directory bonding and all that stuff. So I would add that in here. I would not have these two, but just to give you an idea, it's already grabbed the enrollment profile and the trust profile. There we go. That I placed in my DeployStudio shares. So in the configuration profiles, I already have them downloaded. It's automatically going to grab these and again install these once the computer has been fully imaged. So once it's gone through all these steps, on Profile Manager, I just add them to the server, and then it applies all the settings from the server. If you have any commands you'd like to run, you would come in here and you can run those. So any scripts you have, such as we have Adobe Creative Cloud, and so our machines serialize after the computers have been imaged. So this script here is what's going to do that for us. There's a lot here to play with. It's what you want to do. You make your own custom workflows, but it's very handy. Once you create it, you need to publish it. If I go back to DeployStudio runtime here, again, this is what you're going to see on the client end itself. Refresh that. So now on the client, if I were to go ahead and hit play, it is going to go through each and every single one of these steps automatically. The only step it's actually going to stop at is here where it's asking me to put in the name of the computer itself. But once that's been done, it just goes right through the entire thing. Computer restarts, goes through post ghost, and then it'll be sitting at your login screen waiting for you to log in. So basically that is DeployStudio Server from the ground up of just a base 10.4 or 10.10.4 Yosemite with the latest version of DeployStudio. I hope this video has helped. Thank you.